Hi, I'm Gail.
And hi, I'm Catherine. Welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, our award-winning weekly podcast. Visit womenover70.com to learn all about our offerings and ways to become involved. Consider joining Aging Reimagined Circle as a member. Enjoy free participation in our online monthly programs. And we want to thank our sponsor, Women's Connection. This is a nonprofit women's group with chapters around the country. Members are vibrant, accomplished women age 50 and forward who connect around common interests, empower each other to thrive, and stick together as they travel through the stuff of life, no matter what comes their way. You can find them at womenconnecting.org.
And today we're happy to have with us advocate Deb Krier, who was happily living her life as founder and CEO of Wise Woman Communications, LLC, an award-winning full-service public relations and marketing firm. She was the successful host of Business Power Hour on C-Suite Radio and had earned a wide reputation as a LinkedIn strategist. In 2015, all that changed when Deb learned she had metastatic breast cancer. Trying Not to Die Live was her heartfelt initiative born from the realization that amidst the challenges of cancer, we often become consumed by the fear of dying, overlooking the importance of truly living. Her mission is to remind those on this journey that while fighting for survival is crucial, embracing life is equally essential. Deb Krier is rewriting the playbook on how to live with cancer. In her words, I was diagnosed in 2015 with stage 4 triple positive breast cancer, basal cell carcinoma in 2021, and papillary thyroid carcinoma in 2023. I've experienced the disconnection and despair of a system where cancer is the star of the show, while people with the cancer are silently watching from the sidelines. Now she uses her experience and expertise to kill cancer with honesty, communication, and collaboration. So welcome to Women Over 70, Aging Reimagined, Deb. You are.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be on the program.
Well, we're glad to have you. And really, your courage is exemplary, and you're a beacon of light in all who follow in your footsteps.
Well, thank you.
That's for light. So, having experienced cancer twice myself, I know that these diagnoses can just throw people into a tailspin. And how did you turn that around and make it what it was for you today?
Well, it did throw me into a tailspin. My initial diagnosis was stage 0. And so we weren't even all that concerned. And then several months later, they went, oh, oops. And I remember I told my doctor, I'm sorry, I don't have time for that. And she looked at me like, but all you have to hear is the word cancer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a cold shiver, right? All of those things, because we all know people who have died from cancer. I mean, that's just, and it's just kind of the thing. And so that's our first thought. Well, I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, we're all going to die. I mean, but I really don't want it to be from cancer. But it does throw us for a tailspin. But I think the thing to do is to acknowledge I'm scared, I'm hurt, I'm angry, all of those things. Give yourself the grace to go through those emotions. Don't try to ignore them, because it's very normal to have those feelings. And then go, okay, now what are we going to do? How are we going to get through this? And I think that's the thing is, and periodically we backslide, right? We have pity parties. We do all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But again, that's normal. That's natural. And it's okay to feel those emotions. Just don't get stuck there.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what did you do about this? How did you, move forward with your life?
Well, many years ago, I worked for an oncologist who was absolutely wonderful. I actually thought, I live in Atlanta now, and I thought about moving back to Denver. And then I realized he's probably dead. And he was. But he was just incredible. And then I also worked for the American Cancer Society. So I know just enough to be dangerous, right? I see those words and I'm like, oh, I know what those words mean. And so it was one of those where I really did think, okay, how am I going to get through this? And the thing that Dr. Rabinowitz many, many years ago said was, 99% of this is in your head. If you think you're going to die, you will die. If you think you're going to live, you will live. Now, it might be 5 days, but how are you going to live in that time frame? And so I made up my mind. This was not going to be the end of me. And even when they said stage 4, it was like, okay, well, that's annoying. But, it really was, I'm just going to keep going. I'm not going to let this stop me.
Good for you. Yeah, right. So
this was back in 2015 when you got this diagnosis.
Yeah. And so, I hit my 10-year mark last week, with no other reoccurrence of the breast cancer. So, yay, party time.
So you started tryingnottodie.live.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that was an extension.
You can have pretty much any extension anymore, I think.
Is it live or live?
It's live, right? Because the concept is that we get so caught up in trying to not die, and whether it's cancer or anything, that we forget that we have to live our lives. And so, you mentioned I'm a marketing person. So I thought, okay, that seems like a good thing to be adding on there.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And you're also a cancer coach.
Mm-hmm, I am. And that's fairly recent. I passed my certifications earlier this year, and I work with executives and business owners who are told that they have cancer, because you're told that, well, like we said at the start, total tailspin. But then when you're in charge of a business, it's even more so. And the big thing is, in many cases, they don't want to tell anybody. Right? They might lose clients, they might lose employees, all of these various things. And we think, oh, we're business owners, we must be strong and tough. And so they need somebody to talk to, and somebody to share with them what this journey is going to be like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know someone who was a professor who had the same diagnosis as you, and she absolutely refused to tell anybody at all about it. Not her close friends, not anybody who worked with her, nobody.
Mm-hmm.
So do you recommend that as an approach, or what do you think?
Obviously it's a personal choice. Now I'm chatty Cathy, clearly. And so I told everybody, and part of that was because I did want to use it as a way to educate people. And I suppose that goes back to, when I worked for the American Cancer Society and things like that. But many people just are not comfortable sharing things like that. And that's perfectly fine also. But the one thing that I advise is people will start guessing, hey, there's something going on. Maybe you're the boss, the owner of the company, and all of a sudden you don't look good. And you're coming in late every day. Well, if you don't address something, your employees will make it up. We don't like a vacuum, right? And they never make it up in a good way. It's going to be, oh, he's out partying all night and, all these things. So I tell people, share what you're comfortable with sharing. Again, if and so you might just say, I'm dealing with a medical issue. You don't have to say anything more, but then say, I'm going to need your help. And your employees, your staff, whoever it is, will step up, and that's the good thing.
Yeah.
Are you working with both men and women?
Mm-hmm. And the issues do seem to be pretty much the same. I think we see men being more tough and not wanting to share, right? I mean, that's just what they do. And women, we get more concerned about everybody else, and we forget that we're the sick people, and because we fall back into that caregiver role. So yeah, that's part of why we don't share. But it is a challenge, and I think it's always a challenge because then people are going to ask, they're going to say things, and so what do you say? And that's sometimes why people don't want to talk about it, because we always get oh, well, my Aunt Mildred had the same type of cancer, and she did this and this and this and this, and she died. Right? They can almost never say, and now she's running marathons, right? And so, it's that, and those people, they always mean well, but, sometimes we need to nip it in the bud before they get to the, well, she died part.
So
I'm curious about the oncologist you worked with years ago who said it's 99% your attitude. So what else helped you besides your positive attitude? What other did you take? What treatments did you do, et cetera?
Okay. So I went with the very traditional type of approach. And, I tell people, you have to do what you think is going to be best for you. And maybe it was because of my background and, some things like that, but I was going to do chemotherapy, then surgery, then radiation. And, just kind of do, the traditional things. Now, unfortunately, my very first chemo treatment almost killed me. We kind of laugh about that, but it really did. I mean, I ended up in the hospital for 7 weeks and I had septic shock. I was at that point in time, the only person the complication I got happened less than 1% of the time, which is why you ended up in, with sepsis and then eventually septic shock, because they didn't, you didn't know, hey, something's going on. This is bad. But I at that point, I was the only person that had ever survived it. And my oncologist had someone who had died from that complication. So she knew exactly what was going on. And so, I spent, 7 weeks in and out of ICU, in and out of lots of surgeries. My scars have scars, and, all sorts of things. And then I decided to have a double mastectomy. And I decided to not do reconstructive surgery. Partially, I was like, I'm old. And I wanted to do the double, so both sides, because I didn't want to have to worry. Hey, is something going to happen with the other side, right? And so I got a complication from that my surgeon had never seen. But yeah, it just I did, and now the funny thing is when I had radiation, so my treatment was 30 days, and I went every day except weekends, so it was pretty much a month, and I had nothing that happened. And they were actually very amazed at that, because this redheaded freckly kid should have gotten some burns. And yeah, you could not tell that I had radiation. So they'd bring other doctors in and they'd poke and I go, stop it. But yeah, like I said, I chose the very traditional approach to dealing with cancer.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Mm. And so this upbeat attitude and the way you've approached all this it's not all that usual. And so I'm wondering, was there anything in your upbringing, in your early days, that might have prepared you for this journey?
I'm always like this. I mean,
we're born this way.
Yeah, I was born, like the song says, I was born this way. So my maiden name was Gore. And when I was little, I remember they called me Debbie Go Gore. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm always on is maybe the thing. And so when I'm not, people know, ooh, there's something going on. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it just, and I'm an only child. I was raised in the mountains of Colorado, had to fend for myself. I mean, all sorts of things, but it's just, this has always been me to kind of be like this. Am I like this always? No. When I hit the wall hard. And, but yeah, I'm like this. But my mom was one who she was very independent. My dad worked for the state of Colorado and was working a lot. So a lot of times it was just me and my mom. And I always remember her saying, you have to be very independent. You are responsible for you. All of these things, married to an absolutely wonderful man. But yeah, mom was always, you take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And that stuck with you.
It did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So were there any warning signs that alerted you to the diagnosis?
There was absolutely nothing. I went in for my annual checkup, had a mammogram, and I didn't even get home. And I'm 5 minutes from the hospital, and they called and said, you need to come back. And of course they can't say why or anything. But I'm, it was like, oh, wasn't that I didn't smile pretty, right? And so I went back, and what the diagnosis was microcalcifications. So not a lump, not a bump, nothing you could feel. I mean, the computer saw these things. This is before AI was doing these things, right? The computer saw it, and it was just these tiny little spots. So I go to Dr. Google. Now, don't do that. Dr. Google's bad. But I didn't know what a microcalcification was. And so I looked it up and discovered that women over a certain age get these. As the hormones in our bodies change, we just get these little things that are floating around. The vast majority of the time, there is absolutely no problem. But what happened with me is they started to gather. And so that was the problem. But it also meant that they probably were throughout my body. And so that was part of why I had, a really, really large dose of chemotherapy. But yeah, I mean, there was absolutely nothing there that, was in, an indicator that, hey, there's going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And that was 10 years ago.
It was. Yep.
So what were those other diagnoses?
So it's been about 4 years ago, basal cell carcinoma, and that sounds horrible and awful. It's your basic garden variety skin cancer. I had gone to my doctor, and anything else, those type of questions. And I said, well, you know what? I got this sore on my arm that doesn't want to heal. It was tiny. It was about the size of a pea. And she took one look at it, and across the street, I went to the dermatologist, who did a biopsy, and it came back as basal cell carcinoma. Mine was extremely easy to treat. It was probably due to the fact that, I am this redheaded freckled kid from Colorado that never knew what sunscreen was. It was kind of surprising that I never had skin cancer. I'd never been to a dermatologist until that point. Now I get to go every 6 months, but and so yeah, I mean, they didn't even take a stitch. It was so easy to treat. And then 2 years ago, I had a PET scan for something pertaining to my breast cancer. That didn't show anything on that, but they said, oh, by the way, you've got a lesion on your thyroid. And there actually were two. There was one on either side, and those came back as basal cell carcinoma. Or no, papillary thyroid cancer. I get all my cancers mixed up. But we caught it extremely early. And I had absolutely no symptoms. And I did have my entire thyroid gland removed. And so I get to take a fun pill every day until I die. But yeah, I mean, it was really, again, no symptoms at all, but we caught it so incredibly early, that it hadn't had a chance to spread.
Mm-hmm. So I'm
sorry, Al, go ahead.
I'm wondering, what else do you do? What do you do in your, if you have any spare time?
I do have spare time. So I do several things as a volunteer. I volunteer with the University of Colorado, even though I'm here in Atlanta. I serve on the advisory board for the Dean of Arts and Sciences back in Boulder. And I go back a couple times a year for board meetings, and I do other things. That's the nice thing about online, right? I can do quite a few things. So I do that. And then I'm also very involved, and this is just strange, in the National Beagle Club of America. So beagles like dogs, right? And so, in fact, we're right in the middle of planning our big national show that will take place in Iowa later this month, and I'm the second in command for it. And it does take a lot of time. And I've told them, this is my last one, folks. Y'all need to find somebody else. But it's a lot of fun. And then I read. I enjoy my husband's gardening because I have a black thumb, and so just things like that.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you about your sources of support other than the medical teams, and you just mentioned your husband.
My husband has been obviously the biggest source of support. I couldn't have done this without him. People tell me, "Oh, you're my hero," and I say, "Well, okay, thank you." But our caregivers are superheroes, right? When I was so ill, my mother came out, and I can't imagine she would have gotten a phone call and that said, from my husband saying, you need to get out here. And she was in Kansas. We're here in Atlanta, and you won't make it, because they were literally arguing over how fast I would die that day. And so, I can't imagine making that phone call, right? But she came out, she stayed for 4.5 months, which was a little long, but it meant that all the time I was in the hospital, things like that, I was never alone. And that was so incredible, to have that, because it also freed up the staff, right? They didn't have to keep checking on me because there was somebody in my hospital room all the time. Some of the people I thought would be my biggest supporters dropped off the face of the earth. And that is actually fairly common. They, for whatever reason, won't deal with it. And that's okay. You don't ever want to force anybody. But other people who I didn't even think knew I existed have been some of my biggest supporters. I do have a private Facebook group where I post just about my cancer. It's separate from Trying Not to Die.live. And it's got 400 and some people who are part of it. And I'm pretty sure they're like 10 years. Oh my God, she's still having treatment 10 years into this. But they, there's so much support that I get from them. And I remember one time I was going in for surgery, and I've had over 30 surgeries because of all of this.
Wow.
And I was in there, and it was not one of the, it was, pretty simple, basic surgery as far as surgeries go. But I remember thinking, well, I can't die. All those people would be annoyed. But I always knew, and I still know, that I have this bubble of support from them. Prayers, good thoughts, healing thoughts, whatever it is that we want to call it, they're all there. And to me, that is just absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
So what else would you like to tell our listeners that we haven't talked about yet?
The really big thing is you are your own advocate. You have to be. And I don't care if you're 20, 70, 90, you are your advocate. Those people in those white coats are very knowledgeable. They've been to school an awful long time, but it's our decisions to make as to what we're going to do. I know people who have not done what we call traditional medicine in any way. That's great. That's their choice. And so, but we need to be our own advocates. And, if for some reason we're not able to, then we need to have someone who is going to advocate for us. But it's our decision. And I don't care if it's what type of cancer treatment you're getting, or I want that promotion at work, or whatever it is, we are our own advocates. And especially as women, right?
Right.
Did you always feel like you knew your body, that you were able to be an advocate for your physical self?
No, and I don't know. It's all, now if there was something where I thought, hey, this is not right, I would know. But, we all, how many times do we just power on, right? I don't need to do this. I don't need to do that. But I think we do need to pay attention to our bodies, even if it's just things like you're extra tired, you're, just something that's different, that's not, not what we're used to. And we know it could be a scary answer, but that's okay. But yeah, I was never one, that really was in touch with my body. In fact, it really did surprise the heck out of me. Every time they would say, "Hey, there's something wrong," I was like, "Really?"
Thank you so much, Deb, for being with us.
Oh, thank you, ladies.
And everyone should visit tryingnottoDie.live. And we thank you again for being with us.
And listeners, our numbers continue to grow. And still, we'd like to see more of you at our monthly online programs. So join Aging Reimagined Circle and participate for no charge. Make your voice heard as together we change the conversation about women aging. And if you like this podcast, we recommend Ilana Landsberg-Lewis, who is host of Wisdom at Work, Older Women, Elder Women, and Grandmothers on the Move. She features energizing and inspiring conversations with older women activists and artists the world over. Their wisdom, resilience, and continued contribution to improving the human condition is just what we need in these times. Thank you for listening.